Thank you very much, Councillor Soy, and ladies and gentlemen. Well, this is a wonderful event. I've had the privilege and pleasure of coming here to the International Peace Day before, and I think this is the best yet, and I want to congratulate all those who have organized and taken part in it. It's given me a lift. And thank you, Mark, for what you did at the end of your talk. You had us join hands, and that is really what peace is about. It's from our heart to join hands. Well, it gets a bit more complicated, of course, when the politicians and diplomats get into it. So we have to deal with some of the subjects that are at the forefront of why we don't have the peace that we want in our hearts. And one of those subjects is, of course, Syria. It's in our minds today. And what are the lessons that we can learn from what has taken place in Syria so far? That's an appropriate question as we mark the International Day of Peace. We always need to examine the dangerous war clouds as we continue our search for the path to peace. So that question is particularly relevant today when we consider the intensity of the suffering of the people of Syria and the debate over how to help the people who are suffering in Syria. So at the very outset, let us remember with our hearts and our minds those who have been killed, maimed, displaced by the Syrian conflict. They have endured tremendous suffering. And we have come perilously close to escalating the war in Syria. And indeed, the crisis is not yet over. But I think we can already draw 3 lessons from what we have observed so far that give us hope that the world is by no means fated for continual wars. The first of these lessons is that the Obama administration's threat to use military intervention in Syria, which means bombing sites with uncontrollable collateral human casualties, that threat was met with resistance from people around the world. And it was especially notable that the American public strongly opposed going to war in Syria. The debacles that the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan became have registered in people's minds. The public around the world no longer thinks that it is necessary to deal with oppressions and killings and violence with other forms of violence. And so I think that the conscience of humanity is stirring at this moment. That's a big advance. The world is moving to a more peaceful state. You might think that that's a preposterous statement if you look only at the headlines. But it is true, because more people are, than any time in history, are able to pursue what the Universal Declaration of Human Rights put it, their right to life, liberty, and the security of person. I'm not saying that we're living in perfect harmony, or that all violence is ended, or that all suffering is eliminated. I am saying that more people are freed from the physical acts of warfare than ever before. Even this upsurge in Syria, tragic as it is, does not change the downward trend in the world. People are inundated with ghastly images of brutality brought to them in their living rooms by round-the-clock reporting of existing conflicts. But it is the scale of the reporting to 24/7 that has intensified, not the acts of violence themselves. We have not arrived at a destination called peace, but our journey toward that destination is picking up speed. And recognizing the journey we are on gives us hope for a future of more peaceful conditions. The second lesson is that despite the way the big powers have often overridden it, the United Nations matters. Both the US and Russia are turning to the UN to find common ground to end the Syrian conflict. When the major powers cooperate and do not paralyze the international community with their vetoes, the UN can achieve great results. The organization has a proven track record. The list of war-torn places that have given way to processes of peace and reconciliation as a result of UN mediation is long. Angola, Ivory Coast, Mozambique, Guatemala, El Salvador, Timor-Leste, and Sierra Leone. All these places have stories of progress to tell in building the conditions for peace. UN peacekeeping forces, awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1988, have been at the heart of UN peacekeeping operations since 1948. 67 operations have been conducted in 42 countries over the course of 6.5 decades. That is a tremendous record. Peacekeeping operations in Cambodia, El Salvador, Liberia, Mozambique, Namibia, Sierra Leone stand out as success stories. New mechanisms to improve peacekeeping, peace building, and international justice, many under United Nations auspices, are laboriously being built today. This creativity goes largely unreported, and people are unaware of the great strides being made in changing the old culture of war into a culture of peace. The third lesson is that the responsibility to protect doctrine is coming into better focus. In 2005, the UN World Summit of 150 government leaders unanimously endorsed the responsibility to protect, stating that the international community, through the UN, has the responsibility to use appropriate diplomatic, humanitarian, and other peaceful means to help protect populations from genocide, war crimes, ethnic cleansing, and crimes against humanity. And also that collective military action can be taken on a case-by-case basis under the authority of the Security Council if peaceful means are inadequate. The responsibility to protect is not about human rights violations or conflict situations in general. Rather, it's about responding to 4 designated crimes: genocide, war crimes, ethnic cleansing, and crimes against humanity. When the responsibility to protect principles were first struck, the emphasis was on the protection of innocent people, not necessarily winning a war or deposing the despot or the one who's ruling the country. And we saw in Libya that the doctrine of the responsibility to protect was misused when they went on, the forces went on to topple the Gaddafi regime, however odious the regime was. And so what we can learn from this is that if the powerful states insist that the principles include ousting an abhorrent dictator, then it may become impossible to get Security Council agreement on further use of military force in atrocity crime situations. This is exactly what we're seeing now in Syria, this long impasse. We must be able to find a resolution that will bring states together and will have teeth in it to ensure that those who have been suffering will no longer be subjected to the kind of violence they were before. That is what the responsibility to protect doctrine does, and as I say, is coming into sharper focus. Indeed, the responsibility to protect is now a major element, if not the major element, on the world agenda. And you'll hear a lot about it next week when the United Nations holds its annual debate of leaders at the General Assembly. So we're still in a learning process as we come together to celebrate and observe the International Day of Peace. We're still learning how to build the conditions for peace. We're learning to move to preventive diplomacy to avert war. This is a big gain for humanity. And I think that that's a reason for us to take heart on this International Day of Peace. Thank you.